Welcome back to Naval Action and episode 44 of A Letter to the King. If you're new to the series, this is a weekly newsletter I do to try and keep us up to date with what's happening PvP-wise in naval action on Euro PvP 1. So before we get stuck into this week's hilarity, let's have a little shufty at where we were this time last week. And really we could probably divide the map into 4 zones for hostility. There's the southern part of the Antilles over here, from the Windward Islands all the way over to, I suppose, along the coasts here of South America, along to Santa Marta. The Brits and the Spanish are having a little bit of a gentle fight across a few ports around here. It's all a bit handbags, to be honest. Haiti, which I think 2 wars ago was the real hotspot, is back on, and we're starting to see some regular attacks in Haiti. And of course, along the Live Oak coast, the Americans are beginning to try and put a bit of pressure on the Spanish. And the Spanish are responding, and in the middle there we've got this little outcrop of Danes. I must warn you that Mrs. J's got her sister over visiting at the moment, so there could be lots of extra noises from the galley, as I've now got the pair of them chained in there making nommy nom foods for me. The alliances are settled at the moment. I'm hoping they're fixed now. I noticed that the Dutch will leave the British alliance in 2 days, but also the voting is up in 2 days. So I'm hoping maybe they've resynchronized and we just had to have one turn of each one falling out. So effectively it's taken 21 or 28 days to wash through. But we'll know that soon enough. So what has been happening this week? Well, I would say it's the week of repetition. The Brits defending down in the Windward Islands were visited, this time not by the French but by the Swedes. Now it has to be said, when I talk about the Brits, it's the British port that's been defended. There are screeners from across the British Alliance. There's always a good turnout of Dutch, and we're seeing more and more Americans rock up. And this is excellent. And equally, although it was a Swede-initiated attack, they too turn up with their allies. Predominantly in this part of the map, it's the French and the Danes. There's the odd Spaniard in there, but far and few between compared to the Dutch. The Danes and the French. And one of the notable pickups in the last 2 or 3 weeks is just how well the alliances are beginning to support each other. So that's really good. And indeed, in general, one of the good things that's happened this week is this is probably the 2nd or 3rd week I've noticed our numbers are rising a bit, not lots, but a bit. Maybe 5 to 10% a week over the last 2 to 3 weeks on our sort of medium player base. And something that's really good that's come out of the quiet period, and I hope stays if we do pick up momentum, is that these port battles are super multi-clan affairs. There's quite often 5 or 6 clans involved, and quite often 2 or even 3 nations involved inside the same port battle on each side. So it's far more inclusive than it was perhaps 4 or 5 months ago, in the middle of what I refer to as the 3 Admirals Wars, where it was really 1 or 2 clans on each nation that ran out with 25 ship fleets, and they just followed their manifesto. Now the interesting thing is that the Swedes early in the week came and attacked British Town, and it was actually a very good fight. It was one of those fights that at the half an hour mark perhaps could have gone anyway. However, the Brits turned it around and then really dominoed the Swedes and pushed them out. But one is nothing if not persistent, and they were back towards the end of the week. And this was a less spectacular affair. I think the Swedes did quite well in this battle. Some of them are sort of claiming a bit of a moral victory. They held 2-to-1 circles for a while. However, they still lost more ships. And to be honest, I think I was in the second defence. It's hard to tell because there's been so many double ups this week. And from a defender's point of view, and just sitting, working, listening to our command, it never felt as though we were in trouble. In the second battle, they entered from quite far away. And to be honest, although they did well once the engagement started, it probably took the attacking force about 30 minutes really to assemble properly, because the screening forces had caused them to be so fragmented. In fact, one of my preferred streamers on the opposition never made it in. So there's an excellent PvP video of theirs kicking around on trying to get through the screening fleet, but it means I didn't get to watch from the enemy's eyes in the port battle. Anyway, the Swede-led attack was repelled for a second time. Meanwhile, the Brits have decided to have a crack at Salamanca again. This is a really tough one because it's got a very narrow channel to get up, so screening is easy as. Their first attack really didn't work very well as far as we couldn't get the screeners in. Now, their second attack happened this morning, and the only feedback I've got is from the British perspective, it was bad. So that's it, that's all I know. It was bad. I'm sure one of you can link me a link, or maybe by tomorrow someone will put the video up. But Spain defended easily by the sounds of things. So 2 attacks from the Brits this week on Salamanca. The Americans had another hit at the Spanish, trying to extend their line out from A's. And this was, again, it was I wouldn't say easily defended, but it was defended. The Dutch had a go at Pampatà early in the week, and the first go wasn't so solid, but they did come back again towards the second half of the week, and this was an interesting one because I'm a little bit annoyed at this because the Dutch were calling for some British help, and unfortunately the British had another port battle on at the same time. And the Dutch have been fantastic screens for the Brits, so I really wish we could have got some captains down there. But the Brits at the time, I think, were attacking Les Cays, and although there were a handful of Brits involved, or a smattering of Brits involved, the Dutch were a little bit underserved by British captains in the actual port battle proper. However, it was an interesting battle, and I think the Dutch went in 6 or 7 ships less than the defenders. This is a 4th-rate battle, and I would say that although they didn't win the port, it took them 30 minutes to get into position, to be honest, but they were 5 or 6 ships down, maybe even 7 ships down, and I would say they won the battle. They didn't win the port, but they won the battle. There was a new commander. I wasn't overly familiar with them, and he did a fantastic job. Really insightful, and it was very interesting watching the battle unfold under his command. And it was a very different set of tactics, actually. It was quite a bit more naval, for him, to be honest. And it's a pity they didn't have another 6 or 7 ships in there, although I still think the time might have eaten them up. But that was a really good, that's on the forums if you want to get into that. That was a really good port battle, Pampatà 2 for the week. The French attacked Castries, and they did so twice. The first time they were quite well screened, and I'm not sure they ever got a full fleet into the battle, and it was pretty much a furphy. The second time they did manage to get either a full fleet or a near full fleet in. It was a solid defence by the Brits. Again, it could have developed differently, but I think the Brits played it very savvy with when to go to which circle and when to engage, and they pretty much ran the engagement. And the Brits got, I think they only lost 3 ships, and the French lost quite a few more. I think the second one was probably more Danes than French. The first one was more French, but they struggled with the screen. I was part of the screening force in the earlier attack, and from memory I think they started off really with 7 ships in. That's all they got in for the first little while. I think they ended up getting about 15 in, but it was all far too late, and you're really in the claws of the defender. If you come in short-shifted in these port battles, you do get ripped up. So both times the French were repelled from Castries. The pirates had a couple of goes against the Swedes, and I think this is fourth rate as well. And there was 2 battles in here, and they were both reasonably similar. In both cases, I felt the attackers did a reasonably good job. Much more of a mixed fleet attacking, as in lots of different clans and players. There may have been some new players involved, especially in the second one. And although they didn't win, it was one you just felt as I'm not saying it was training wheels, but I just felt that the Pirates, a bit like the US to some extent, are just beginning to reform as a functional port battling fleet. And it wouldn't surprise me if the Pirates or the US started to have more success in the future. I would say in both battles that the predominantly Swede / I think it was Dane defence with the odd Frenchie in there. In both cases, I doubt they felt they were ever going to lose. But I watched a video from the Pirate side, and although they never at this point where if they'd have made one decision they would have won, but you could see you could whiff the opportunity of a victory in the future with the Pirates. The French defended Les Cays the first time, and again this is another double banger. The Brits really failed in getting their proper fleet in through the screening. The second time the Brits actually did quite well in the battle itself, and this is kind of the story, isn't it? The attacker sometimes does quite well. You know, they on a ship count on the tally of ships at the end of the battle, quite often it's incredibly close, but it's just holding those circles and getting those points and dealing with the wind that's stopping the attackers from winning more. And finally, the Dutch had a crack to try and sort of join up their coastline down here. I've forgotten the name, Santa Marta, I think. So the Dutch had a crack down here. I'm pretty sure it was Santa Marta. I do have it on notes somewhere, but anyway. Yes, Santa Marta. And whereas, as I've shown here, there was lots of double bangers, and there was lots of days where a nation would have to defend 2 ports. But Spain had a bit of an unfortunate one in that they were probably the only people who had 2 or 3 activities on at the same time, and I think they had to make a decision as to where needed defending. It wasn't any great Machiavellian plan by the attacking forces. Towards the end of last weekend, every man and his dog was out generating hostility. The Brits and the French had 2 battles on the same day, but they were separated by about 45 minutes. The Swedes had 2 battles, but they were separated by about an hour and a half. The Dutch had 2 battles, but they were separated by about an hour. Whereas the Spanish had 3 battles, and 2 of them overlapped a lot, and one of them probably meant it would be hard to move ships around. So in the end, I think they chose not to defend this. Well, they did choose not to defend this. And I think 2 Spanish and 1 French Jap made it into battle. So the Dutch were the only people to take a port this week. And that does really bring us to the big question of, well, now I've got my own records. These are probably not 100% right because I scribble stuff down on a pad. Each day and then try and watch videos and read reports, or I'm in the battle myself. So it's a little bit all approximate, to be honest. So I've got 54 contested port battles. So for example, when Sweden took these things down here off their allies, I don't count that as a port battle. When the Danes took the tip of Haiti, I don't count those as contested port battles. So 54 contested port battles. I don't count this one down here as contested. But actually, no, I do, because this was enemy on enemy, and Spain chose not to come. So that would count as a contested port battle. And there's been 7 wins for the attackers. 6, I would say, where it's been a 20 plus versus 20 plus. So why is that? Is it because we're all crap? Is it because the game is broken? Is it because we've not really worked out the tactics? So for me, these are the main reasons why it's hard to win as an attacker. We now get 2 days notice. Of course, under the flag system, you've got an hour's notice. And with the 3 towers, you could brawl. And you could brawl by just chasing the enemy until they were at the edge of the circle. Well, that's not the case anymore. There is no finite circle we're fighting in. So you've got 2 days notice, so we can organise very organised screens. And as I spoke about last week, the rules of engagement are a bit wobbly at the moment with the world's biggest circle for sucking folks in. So screening, which I really like the idea of, is too easy and way too much in favour of the defender at the moment. And if you're in a nation that can maybe field 40 ships and you're up against a nation that's got 60 ships, getting into the battle is nigh on impossible. The second thing is the wind, and it's the wind twice. So once, because you can just have a bit of bad luck. You can't predict the direction the wind's going to blow in. You can predict it after restart. Every time the server restarts, the wind is randomly pointing in some direction. And then fundamentally, it does a full rotation in approximately 50 minutes. It's not 50 minutes, but for purposes of this conversation, it is. So if you know what time your port battle is, after server restart, you can pretty much calculate the direction of the wind. And being a bunch of crazy bastards like we are, there's lots of spreadsheets out there now that will do exactly that. So you can know as you approach the port the direction of the wind. Now, of course, in real life, if the attacking force was approaching the fort that they wanted to go after and the wind was blowing in their face, they would just wait for the wind to change. And essentially blockade the port, or decide that they can't attack the port today because the wind's too stupid and have to go somewhere else. But in the game, your port timer is set, so you can't wait for the wind. So the next thing you can do is you can enter the semicircle, which is presented to you fundamentally off land, at the best possible spot for you. And assuming the screeners don't stop that from happening, you can get in where the wind will pretty much mean you can get into one circle quite quickly and then maneuver to the next circle. Now, this is also true, of course, for the defenders, who to some extent are guaranteed to have a circle. They start in a circle. So even if you're the best attacking fleet in the world, you will be 80 to 100 points to 0 down by the time you capture the second circle. You then have to go to the third circle. The defenders know this, and so what we have a situation is that the attackers have to make the agenda despite the wind. Whereas the defenders also know the direction the wind is blowing, and they know I'll send 2 ships here and 23 ships there, and then we'll engage them in a brawl in the third circle, as it were. Now, then the wind randomly changes direction. So when the Brits were attacking the French at Trinidad earlier this week, there was a situation where the Brits had taken one circle, had 3 ships going to the other, whereas I think the French at the time had 2. If the wind had randomly started going clockwise, the defenders were in deep shit, because they would not have been able to reinforce their second circle and would have been stuck in a brawl with the wind against them, pretty much in their own deployment zone. And however, the wind turned the other way, and this basically meant now the defenders could send ships as quickly as they chose to the second circle, and if the Brits did that, the defenders could then push into the third. So the wind is not something you can choose as the attacker, which of course you would, and it forces inside the port battle that the attackers must set the agenda. And if the wind isn't good, just to give you an idea, typically in one of the ports that has 3 circles in a sort of triangle shape, if you're sailing in bad wind, it will take about 17 minutes to get from one circle to the other. Now, if your opponent holds 3 circles, they win in 21 minutes. If they hold 2 circles, they win in 41 minutes. So this means the attacker is always taking the risk. And typically in an attack on defense, it should be in favor of the defender. But typically in military combat, the attacker brings a greater force, knowing that they will have to have a higher rate of death and attrition in attacking. And that's not there at the moment. Now, the next point is a very important one, and that is that when we began naval action and port battles, ships were a lot easier to sink. Have a look at some of the earlier videos where a broadside will take a quarter or a half of a ship's side off, where carronades at point blank range will devastate your opponent's hull. Now, carronades are a thing of the past as far as being the weapon of choice. The building capabilities you have now with regional bonuses means that it's more possible to have large health pool, hard to penetrate ships. The penetration mechanics have been vastly improved, so angling is now much more of a thing. So if you're in a 4th rate battle where it's Agamemnon-noms and Agamemnon-noms, you're only penetrating with the bottom deck of your ship from 150 meters or more. And that's with a flush shot, let alone a shot where your opponent is 20 degrees off you, in which case you're penetrating with far less. So it's much harder to sink ships. So the brawling for points is counterable by holding more circles. And what the hard to sink factor brings into the game is the time limit. So we only have 90 minutes. Now it takes 20 minutes for the attacker to get into an engagement. So they've already lost 70 minutes and they're already probably 200 points behind. Now, of course, the attacker can grab up a couple of 100 points from killing forts, but to be honest, killing forts in a first-rate battle is reasonably easy, because sending a first-rate to chase a mortar brig down is a bit of a waste of guns and a thankful chore. However, sending a 4th rate or a shallow boat to sink a mortar brig, or at least chase it around, is a good swap, and one that will end up in the death of the mortar brig, because other than first rates, mortar brigs are the slowest ships in the game. I think the other part that's important is that we just don't lose ships anymore anywhere near the way we used to. So with the 3 towers, which I think is a far inferior game than the landing port battles is, it wasn't that unusual to see a fleet destroyed. Because it was brawl, you saw a fleet destroyed. Whereas now it's more of a positional battle. I would hazard a guess that most battles end with the loser having half their fleet intact. So it's not like attrition can break the back of a nation. Add to that, we all get free ships from the PvP events. There's welfare epics all over the place. And attrition is no longer a thing. Now, the bigger question is this okay? I actually think most of it is. I would like the time limit to be longer, and I would like it so you can keep on entering a port battle right up until the fact that both sides have got 25 ships each. I would like to see the forts improve so they have a bigger firing arc, because I don't think they cover the port that they're meant to be defending particularly well, and that is their purpose. However, I do think the attackers need to have more of a wind advantage at the start of the battle, because if you were an attacker, you would not attack when the wind is bad. How would you do that? Don't know. But anyway, that's my funkings. Now, the devs woke up from their New Year's Eve party earlier this week and gave us a bit of a what's happening over the next 6 months in our lovely naval action. So the first thing is they've sort of announced a sort of new currency. So I'm sure this won't affect building ships and trading and stuff. But basically you will now earn Admiralty points. So you will do this by doing things, sinking baddie ships, PvP, who knows. And that will earn you Admiralty points. When you earn Admiralty points, this will now give you certain actions. So they're basically looking at getting rid of the current hostility system and creating a new one you can buy by trading in your Admiralty points. What does that mean? Not really sure. Is it closer to the flags? Is it flags 2.0? It could be. Will it have a 2-day window of notice rather than a 1 hour? We would hope that it would be less stupid than 1 hour, because 1 hour is massively in favour of the attackers. You can ninja roll a port because your defences can't form quickly enough. So is it a combination of the timing windows for hostility, but with the declaration mechanics of flags? Now, personally, I didn't think hostility was necessarily a bad idea. I think it needs a lot of tweaking. I've spoken about this before. And a lot of it really is around the way the missions closed too early, which made anti-hostility too hard. But also some of the other things with hostility, such as the fact that the ROE is broken for screening. Anyway, they're going to say that with Admiralty points, or AP, as I have decided they're called, you can buy flags. The other mysterious, and they're great at doing this, the devs, they give us these tease lines, is that we will be able to convert our AP to exclusive content. Well, you'd imagine it would be exclusive, wouldn't you? You'd imagine that you're not going to be able to buy a ship in Elite with your AP, or get yourself a skin for one of your Dota characters. But perhaps this is, I don't know, skins, BPs, who knows what exclusive content is. Perhaps it's access to PvP competitions. Don't know. We'll have to find out. It's mysterious. We all like a bit of mystery. Missions are going to go, because they've admitted that missions was boring. Now, I say about this. So firstly, if it's the only thing you do, mission after mission after mission after mission, yeah, it's boring. But if the only thing you did was trade after trade after trade, or build ship after build ship, or duel after duel, one could say the same. I do missions predominantly to raise hostility, occasionally to help mateys out who are levelling, and sometimes to earn a bit of money if I'm short on money. I wonder what the PvEers are going to do if you take missions away. And I also think missions are a great way for the new players to sort of get into multi-ship battles without having to do it with other humans that are scary. Now they're talking about replacing missions with dailies, so maybe that's a finite number of missions you can do a day, and if that finite amount is enough to keep the PvE community happy and the newbies fed so that they can level their ships as a bit of a solo adventure. I mean, it's all good. I'm all for getting into clans and making friends, but we all enter these things a little bit lonely unless a matey drags us in. So I'm a bit interested by this. I think this is a bit of a lurch too far to one side. Maybe they're just talking about hostility missions. And yes, you can attack AI fleets, but most of the AI fleets aren't noob friendly and would be a crack exercise in PvE. Anyhow, raids. Now, raids, the heads up about raids is tremendous. It says raids, and in the detail it says raids will be implemented. So I would imagine if you're a pirate, you're all excited because you're imagining a pirate raid. I would imagine if you're me, you're all excited because I'm imagining we're going to be able to raid a port prior to attacking it to lower its defences or goof its economy up or raise hostility, etc., etc. I don't really know what it means. I don't think any of us do, and I think we're all going to imagine it means the thing we want. And this isn't the greatest way to set expectations. So, dear lovely Games Labs, if you're wanting a better community engagement model, perhaps in your "this is what's coming," you should use more than phrases like, I mean, this is almost, you know, we're going to have a great economy and it's going to be the most fantastic jobs thing ever because it's going to be superb. That's that's lovely and I'm excited, but we need the detail. We need to know what you're talking about. We need to know what does it mean to me. And RAID has been just a word now that keeps popping up in future content for about 4 or 5 months. So it would be good to know what you're on about when you say raids. Pirate mechanics uplift. Now the naval term for this is aft, which means about fucking time, matey. Now at the moment they're saying pirates can attack pirates, but without exploits. So that's easy. They're talking about getting rid of the smuggler flag, which I don't really know why you do that. How are we going to smuggle? Maybe any trader can go into any port. I'd love to see the nations you're not at war with be neutral. So perhaps if you're a pirate, you're not at war with anybody in a declared war fashion. You're sort of at war with everybody, but you perhaps can take your ship into any port irrespective of anything. They're talking about 2 pirate factions, so essentially a sort of organised federation of pirates under the flag of Nassau, and then a rebellious bunch of uninterconnected swine who would raise the flag of Moody, and these two could biff each other. Now, that's possibly better than what we've got now. This would be more like a nation. This would be more like anarchy. I really would like to see pirate factions based around clan. I've been saying this for a long time. I know some of the pirates that I've spoken to also say the same thing. It was probably their idea, not mine, incidentally. But I would like to see a pirate clan being unable to attack itself, but able to attack other clans, and perhaps the pirate game is to become the most notorious pirates. So instead of earning admiralty points, they earn notoriety or something, peskiness. Anyhow, at least they're doing something for pirates, and that's good, because although they're dirty scumbags, they've not had content pretty much ever. They were just a goofy nation. The UI is going to be uplifted, hurrah, because it looks like my mum wrote it. Multi-language support, boo, everybody should speak English. That should just be an international law. I think you'd all agree with me. Lots of tuning, well that's good, and tweaking of mechanics, that's good. They're talking about getting rid of officers and moving the attributes to a captain. I don't know, this seems like a cop-out to me. I like officers. I'd really like to have a stable of officers so I can have one for my trading ship, one for my shallow water ship, you know. I mean, that's what you'd have. You're not going to have one sodding officer. You don't have one captain who's running around in a cutter one day and then 5 minutes later he's sailing the Victory. So I'm not such a big fan of this, unless it's a bit more flexible, or you can... I mean, even right now, having to respec my officer each time I decide to do some crafting or some trading or some biffing is annoying. A, because the UI's shit, and B, because it's annoying. Just give me 3 profiles then. NPCs will attack. Well, I used to play Elite Dangerous, where you used to get attacked by NPCs all the time. Now, I have to say it's a bit annoying because it sort of is a bit of a time waster. But it keeps you on the edge of your seat. Yes, they're sailing through empty waters. If the NPCs can attack, this is more scary. Now, I think if we were a heavily populated PvP world, you wouldn't need this. This might be something that you'd want more in a PvE environment. Because with PvP, there's enough biffing going on without some Captain Blood having a crack at you. And most of us know with the AI, you can work out how to turn an AI based on the centre of gravity of his ship and all this sort of good stuff. So we can see through the spreadsheet of NPCs quite quickly. They are talking about creating some elite NPCs, and again, most games make things elite just by doubling their health pool or giving them penetration hacks or whatever. It's very, very hard, even though AI is the new thing in the IT world. It is very, very, very hard to be half as good as a human without simply breaking the rules of the mechanics of the game to give an AI ship equal footing. So we'll see. One of the interesting things they're talking about is a Kickstarter, so a separate Kickstarter, where they might do a pack of US ships or a pack of Spanish ships. Now, I think we need to understand this. My expectation is this is just, I love the game, I'll chuck $20 towards it. Enough people do that, they can hire Billy, the AI, the 3D modeler, and he can remodel the Constitution or whatever. And then it goes into the game and we can all use it. That's what I'm assuming. So I'm hoping it's not, if I fund the Kickstarter, I get the ship. That would be bad. That would be moving us towards StarCraft. Not StarCraft, Star Citizen. And I think that's a wee bit exploitative. What they're doing is they're teasing people with vaporware and making them pay for their dreams before they're solidifying. And some of the amount of money you can spend is stupid. Now, if this is just a Kickstarter to bring in some extra money, to pay for some extra modelling and some rendering and so on and so forth, tickety, tick, tick, I'm all for it. I actually think they should go further. And I think that the paints that they drop, and I actually think things like figureheads and being able to have a name on your ship, sort of in a lovely font that's been emblazoned on the back of your boat, so that my mate who's the worst fire ship captain in the world and sails into the middle of an enemy fleet doesn't catch on fire and just sinks, or worse, he does catch on fire and then he sinks before he explodes. He could easily emblazon HMS Asbestos on his ship. I have another matey I sail with, and quite often in the big open water PvP battles he runs around in a little shitter, a Renome or a frigate or something. And his job is that once we've got a ship down so that they're in repair, he just goes in and kills the bad side until it's repaired. So he's HMS kill confirmed. Another friend had a Santissima that he'd had for 6 months, so he named that HMS Unsinkable and promptly lost it to a AI ship about a week later. So we could all imagine. I love making a new ship. Just before I started today's letter to the king, I moved all the mats around the world, and I did my final scary jump where I took 3,000 unit tons of Victory bits into a port so I could make it with the affix that I want from that port. And that moment where you make the ship, there should be a noise, there should be trumpets. You should christen the bloody ship, and I'd pay $2 to give it a name. And I'd pay $2 to buy sail decals that perhaps had a guild emblem or a national from a suite of national emblems. I'd pay $2 for paint jobs for my ships, even paint jobs that had durability on them, to be honest. And that would be a great way for Games Labs to make enough money to keep building this game that we all want them to build. The other interesting thing they said was they're going to change the way they interact with the community. Fundamentally, I think they try hard. I don't think they always succeed. I really think they get into too many arguments with the community. And it's just two passionate people talking about the same thing within a different agenda. Common goals, but different way of doing things, different reason for doing things, different timelines for doing things. So they're talking about changing the community interaction. They should do some Q&A sessions on Reddit, or let me interview them so I become super famous or something. But they need to come up with a truly better model. Like I say, I played Elite Dangerous, and David Braben and co, they had very similar problems to this game with having to flip how things work and stuff simply not working and super imbalance and exploits. But they used to do this sort of monthly Q&A. It was very guarded. They're not going to tell you everything. But it felt it felt better. I actually think Games Labs, given the size of the studio, do a great job. I think they're really trying hard. They're also communicating, for the vast majority of them, not in their native tongue. I'm sure they're working to a very tight budget, and I'm sure they're really burning themselves out. And when they work their arse off to put a new bit of stuff out, and within a day we've got 50 piss and vinegar posts about it's the worst thing ever and I'm leaving the game and it's not fair and you've ruined my Christmas and I'm going to point to the doll where the nasty game touched me, I can imagine they get quite upset. So I'm very glad they've realised their community interaction isn't working. I'll be very interested to see if they sort of, if they've hired the new White House press manager to give us some alternative facts. Anyway, we'll see. And so what does this all mean for my channel? Well, I think it means a couple of things. One of the things I'm going to do is I'm probably going to do a few less ship reviews and a few less things because the game is lurching so quickly from left to right. I'm finding my stuff like crafting recently and then the new hostility stuff, it barely lasts a couple of months. So if a brand new mechanic comes out, so when something like Admiralty Points comes out, I'll try and explain what that means. But I'm gonna focus more on PvP. Hopefully I'll be able to do some more duels with Olav. Unfortunately, we live on the opposite ends of the world, and with our Christmas holidays ending and going back to work, we'll have to squeeze that in. But your priorities have got to be right, so we'll have to squeeze that in. I want more port battles. I want more screening stuff. So I will do, if a new ship comes out, I might do a review on it. But I think most of my stuff is going to be hopefully PvP oriented. And of course my Letters to the King, I'll keep those going until they really arse this game up, or you lot tell me to stop too. So that's sort of it for what's on the horizon. Now let's get back to the PvP. Where's it going to be? Well, there's already quite a few set up. An interesting thing is that the US have gone up on this side of Haiti, and I think they've done that because they've also pulled flags against Savannah. And I think they've done it in US prime time, so that will upset the Danes, who I know are not enjoying being attacked at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I spoke about this at length last week. I have great sympathy for the Danes, but of course every time Europeans attack the Americans, it's out of the American prime time. And I think this is more a symptom of we need 2,000 players on the server and then nations will have the coverage. I also think we need incentives to play, for want of a better term, the smaller nations. So I think perhaps when you're selecting which nation to join, perhaps if one nation is 100 players ahead of any other nation, you can't join that nation. Something like that, just a... in IT, we would call it a round-robin load balancer. And that just means you farm things out equally so that you don't end up with everything on one thing and nothing on the other. Haiti is become a new spectacular biffo zone because of this. So we've got the Swedes have been attacked, the French have been attacked, the Danes have been attacked, and they're mostly being attacked by different people. So it's the Americans, the Brits, and the pirates from memory. South of the Antilles is real hot at the moment. I don't think Spain's going to come back for a piece of this land here. It's a long way from home. So it's all going on. The French and the British are demonstrating the true essence of madness, where we are repeating the same action and expecting a different outcome. Now, I don't know if you just keep running these port battles in Castries and Trinidad and Pampatar until eventually your opponent just arses up, or the wind is a catastrophe. But with a 1 in 10 success rate, we're going to have to change our plans up somehow, boys and girls. But like I say, the good news is we're getting some numbers back, and I'm really enjoying the fact that there's 10 different clans involved in a port battle. The Brits and the Spanish will go at it nowhere near as viciously as down here, but they'll go at it a little bit here. And I expect the Spanish and the US will probably give each other a stretch. So as we come to the end of this week's Letter to the King, it's been a rambling one. Basically, we see the only change. The Spanish are down 4 ports. The Cloggies are up 4 ports. There's a bit of concertinaing happening in the middle now. Everybody's sort of bubbling up around the same area. The people with more ports, these are typically the folks who with the map reset started with more. So that's it for this week's naval action. A bit of a game update, I suppose. A bit of a New Year update. I hope I didn't ramble for too long. For those of you who are thinking of coming back to the game, you've got a bit of insight about what's happening. Come back in. The water's lovely. It's really picking up. There's some great action going on. The new port battles are fun. They are hard to win. We know that. 1 in 10. Almost. But they're great fun. They really are. There's been some splendid battles. Keep the YouTubes coming, guys, who record these battles, or even the screenshots and reports. It's much appreciated. Give us a like, give us a subscribe. I will see you on the ocean, and I will catch you.